Alex Mclean is a musician, software artist, and researcher based between Sheffield and Munich. He's active across digital arts, co-founding the Algorave and TopLap live coding movements and the AlgoMech Festival for Algorithmic Mechanical Movement. He created the popular free open source TidalCycles live coding environment, performing with it at festivals around the world, including Sonar, Glastonbury, Transmedial, Ars Electronica, and No Bounds. He's a researcher and works part-time as part of the Penelope project, investigating the structures of ancient weaves and reinserting weaving into the history of science and technology. So welcome, Alex, to Tinderbox Playway.
So yeah, I'm going to talk about live coding and do a demo of this tidal cycle system I made. And we can have some questions and answers at the end, hopefully some answers. And if you have any questions along the way, please just drop them into the chat and I might answer them as I go if I'm looking for inspiration from the audience. And it'd actually be really interesting to know whether you've heard of live coding before, whether you've been to an Algorave. If you'd like to just let me know what your experience of live coding up to now, or your non-experience of live coding up to now has been in the chat. Okay, so I'll share my screen. I've got a few slides. Right, so this is a slide just showing some of the things I do based in Sheffield. You can see somewhere near Sheffield at the top. I like to use my computer in live performance, as you can see in the bottom left. Some people look at my screen while I'm performing, as you can see there. I'm also really interested in weaving and sort of have a research position at the moment looking at the structures of weaves. I'll try and explain how that fits in with everything else I'm going to be talking about. I'm also involved in an organisation called Foam Now, where we do all kinds of interesting sort of engaged research. And there's a robot there, which my friend Dave made from foam. And there's me again in the bottom right. So what is live coding? It's basically writing live code to make live music. That's what I'm going to be talking about today, mostly anyway, but actually people have also used it to make other live performing arts like choreography. Visuals is very popular at the moment. I'm mainly going to be talking about music, but and that's kind of where live coding came from, but it's really branched out and people are taking it in new directions all the time. The good thing about live coding is that people are just continually live coding what it is, if that makes sense. I mean, live code is really always changing what rules are. That's kind of what live coding is as well. So it kind of resists definition. But this is what a live coding performance would look like in a lot of cases. You have big speakers, nice sound system, Danger Noise sound system from Sheffield in this case. You've got a coder at the front, that's Joanne Armitage. And projected behind her is her screen. That's just what she's looking at. You can see her code there. And the code that she's editing on the fly and while the computer's running it. And that code is generating the sound which people are hearing. Sometimes they dance to it as well. Yeah, just checking the chat. Okay, bit of Maximus P. I've been to AlgoMech. Yes, I thought I recognised the name Sandeep. Okay, Edinburgh Festival of Sound. Okay. So someone's live code, Tom is live coded for showing students how to program, not seen it using this context. Good. Okay, so I can start from scratch with explaining what live coding is. That makes things a bit easier, really. Okay, so TopLap. So the origins of live coding were in this organization formed around 2004. People started sort of live coding music around the year 2000, and there were lots of precursors for a couple of decades before that. But as a community and a movement, it kind of started forming around 2004. There was something in the air, lots of people thinking, why don't I use this programming language for actually making live music? Which was kind of a strange idea at the time. The idea of a creative coder wasn't really understood or respected. Programming was something you did to kind of implement someone else's ideas rather than explore your own. So live coding was a way of coders going on stage and demonstrating that, you know, we have feelings too. We can express ourselves with our chosen languages, and we have a manifesto, which is a bit silly. But one of the points on the manifesto is obscurantism is dangerous. Show us your screens. So this kind of openness is really part of the practice. When someone's live coding, you can usually see exactly what they see and are typing. Then there's Algorave. This came a bit later, but I always wanted to live code to make dance music. And I came up with this stupid name, Algorave. It's like a algorithm and rave put together. It's a logo. And it's really spread. Like it's strange coming up with a dorky word and finding that now there have been algoraves in like 100 different cities and spread around the world. And so the idea of an algorave is really about making code to make people dance, dancing to algorithms. People also live code to make all kinds of music, whether it's controlling a player piano or making drone or noise music or something closer to classical music. I quite like making techno. I also like making jazz improv, but so I thought I'd sort of explain some things that live coders aren't. We're not software engineering. I mean, I am definitely a software engineer, but when I'm live coding, it's not really a case of architecting anything. It's not solving problems. It's more sort of creating problems. You go to do a performance, you want to make some music. Beyond that, you might not have much of an idea about what's going to happen. Here's a performance with my friend Sam. Actually, can you hear that? Okay, you can't actually hear the music. That's a bit sad. Let's see if I can quickly fix that. How about now? Okay. Well, at least you can see what we're doing. So you can see there's actually very little code on the screen, just a few lines that's generating the music that unfortunately you can't hear. But if you look up CCAI at blue.algrave, you could have a look at that later. But there's people in front of you dancing, you're writing this code and sort of in this very focused state on this language in front of you. You can feel the sound in your body from the subwoofers. But at the same time, there's these people moving in you. So it's this very moving in front of you. So it's this very sort of embodied experience. And it's not just what you do that's important, but when you do it. So you're kind of programming really in time to make this music. Just a bit worried about that rewiring I just did. I'm going to disconnect that in case that causes problems. Yeah, I don't know why you can't hear that. Never mind. We're also not DJs, so this comes up a lot in journalistic pieces, which is sort of called people who are replacing DJs, or that we are somehow DJing with code, but we're actually more like music improvisers. We're writing music. DJs are really great, really important experiences in my life given to me by DJs, but it's just not what we're doing. So there's Joanne again with Shelley Knotts as Alga Babes at the same festival I just showed. And there's no records they're playing. There's no pre-recorded pieces or pre-written pieces, although some people do live code with ready-made code, and probably most people do, but it's still sort of a case of working with the code, manipulating it, taking it somewhere in response to audience reactions and the feeling in the room. It's kind of more like playing an instrument than playing music that's recorded. And we're also not the future. I mean, by that I'm thinking about all these. So Wired magazine have every sort of 6 years they've written an article about how live coding is the future, starting from 2006. And I'm getting quite old now, and I've been doing this for quite a long time. I think we're just making music now. We're not really trying to be futuristic. We're actually using interfaces which are pretty old school if you think about it, just typing. So I find this kind of idea about us being cyber musicians or something a bit annoying. We're just making music with code. So yeah, I co-organise Algamec Festival. I just wanted to show this actually just to demonstrate something other than making dance music. This is my friend Alexandra Cardenas and Camilla. Alexandra is live coding there. She did have a screen projected here, but you can't see it. And controlling pneumatics that are feeding into Camilla's accordion pieces. There's all different ways you can use live coding, and it's interesting to see how the different ways in which something quite ephemeral like code can be used to work with something very physical like accordions. Just checking the time. Okay. And I also enjoy live coding weaves. So this is a loom I made. It's a warp weighted loom, which is an ancient technology. Obviously, I made this out of laser cutting, but the actual principle of weaving here is ancient. I've just attached some actuators, some solenoids to it, so that I can control the pedals here with code. And this would be the up and down structure that would be sent to the loom. So I'm just demonstrating how an ancient technology can be mixed with a contemporary one. But the surprising thing is that this isn't a case of bringing programming to the loom and bringing improving weaving technology using contemporary technology, but really the other way around, because weaving itself is digital. Even ancient weaving just with your hands is digital. You're working with discrete elements and combining them and coming up with all these computational interferences. And so for me, engaging between code and the loom is much more about improving programming by learning from much more developed older technologies. But that's a whole topic in itself. And so live coding is spreading and changing, as I was saying, going in new directions. Kids are taking it on. There's projects like Sonic Pi, which are bringing live coding to the classroom. This is a project I did with TidalCycles, getting 8 kids at a time to learn Tidal and record a performance within 1 hour. So this is something which can be learned very quickly and can be, and it's social, it's cultural. And it's a case of where set up these conditions and then just learn from the children to see what this stuff I've made really means when it comes to making music together. I call this an algorithmic drumming circle. On Kate Sikio, I've worked with quite a bit, but she, I mentioned choreography. That's sort of her thing, sort of hacking choreography in different ways, and live coding human dancers. That's Kate there, but that's quite a different situation when the sort of agents you're commanding with your code have agency of themselves. It's interesting stuff. Antonio Roberts is sort of he really is at the forefront of visual live coding, I think, in the UK, but he's also recently got into music as well, so sort of an audio visual live coder. And he's developing a project called Algo Afrofuturism that he's got me involved with, where sort of exploring how early career Black artists can take this kind of technology in new directions. So, I mean, live coding has got sort of a reputation for being quite academic, and it's nice to see how all these different people are taking it in new directions. And actually, live coding communities are probably most active now in sort of South America. Argentina and Mexico have got really strong scenes, really regular parties, in a way which we haven't really ever had in Europe. Okay, so Tidal, that's kind of the blah blah bit. So I'll just kind of talk a little bit about Tidal for 1 minute before shifting to the demo. I'll just double check whether there's any questions. FRP, yes, I'll explain that. Okay, good. Yeah, I think my audio system is just too messed up to show you audio from that YouTube video, but it doesn't matter. So yes, Tidal, it's a system. It's a strange thing that I've developed over the past 10 years. It's free open source software. It's the first thing, so you can try it out for yourself. It's a bit hard to install, but there's a friendly community to help if you get any problems. It works under Mac, Windows, and Linux. So it's designed for working with time in time. So it's FRP stands for functional reactive programming. So it's implemented in a language called Haskell, which is quite an obscure language, and that's the sort of functional bit. But what I really mean by that is that you're working with code that just represents how to transform time into structure. That's all you're doing, is building up this structure, which takes something as simple as the passing of time, and uses that to transform it, twist it into something quite strange. And it does that through algorithmic patterning, as I've started to call it, which is about making and breaking symmetries. So things like reflection, reversal, rotation, shifting backwards and forwards, all these kind of things that if you're a knitter or a weaver or anything like that, you'll be very familiar with. The sort of way of just combining different transformations of a sequence to make something very complex out of very simple parts. By breaking symmetries, this is sort of the idea that if you just take a pan of water, which is like a perfectly symmetrical thing, and heat it, sort of hexagons appear in the surface as it starts to boil. This is the idea that by applying a force to a symmetry, you break it, but that doesn't mean that you get chaos. You get a new symmetry, which is kind of less symmetrical, but more structured, and also can be very surprising. And that's kind of what I like about patterning, is that you're not trying to make something in particular, but just trying things out and breaking them and seeing what the result is. So this is where we shift to YouTube. I would normally just share my code through Zoom, but I find that the sound, at least through this Linux system I'm using, doesn't work too well through Zoom. So we'll just share a link to that in the chat. I'll have to just start the stream first. I shall remember to record it. I was worried about that, but I think I remembered. So hopefully if you go there now, oh, I just need to start it in YouTube too. Excuse me. Probably it's nice to have a break from me talking continually anyway. Okay. So I hope if you load up that YouTube stream, I hope you can see my screen. Seems to be live, thanks, Jed. Okay, so if I type this, what color do you see? That was the, hopefully you see a red bar. Yes, okay. All right, keep the red flag flying. So so I'm actually going to start with, I said this was all going to be about music, but I'm going to start with a color pattern just because it's a bit easier to talk about. There's different parts to Tidal, which I'm going to show over the next sort of 10 minutes or so. See how far I can get. One of the parts is called the mini notation. So this is actually inspired by a system called BP2, the bulb processor by Bernard Bell, who's a sort of French-Indian computer scientist and researcher, which was for originally notating tabular patterns. So tabular is the familiar drums from Indian classical music, and bowls are sort of the speech-based way of notating the rhythms. So Indian classical music tends to be really based around cycles rather than the duration of notes, and also has all kinds of polyrhythmic structures. So by sort of importing these ideas from this other software, sort of imported all this music theory from Indian classical music, even though I don't have any musical training myself. And I'll talk a bit more about polyrhythm and things shortly, because that's a bit more evident when it comes to sound, perhaps. But let's just start with a three-step sequence at the start: blue, sky blue, white, and a two-step sequence at the bottom. You can see I've just done blue, sky blue, white, and then a comma, then orange, red. So this is the mini notation. It's sort of a way to very quickly make sort of polyrhythmic sequences, and I can do things like repeat this bit twice, for example. So now sky blue, white is twice, and then just quickly add, let's have a bit of grey there, and so on. But then outside of that, so inside the double quotes is just this way of making sequences. Just check the chat. Seems to be okay. Shout if you're having problems accessing the stream or anything. So yeah, that's a way of making sequences. And you can actually do quite a lot in that. That's just kind of some of what we call the syntax of the mini notation for sequences. But then there's all the stuff outside of that. So this is where you get into the stranger transformations. So we can do things like just speed it up by saying fast for. Keywords in Tidal tend to be as short as possible, just because if you're performing live in front of people, you don't want to type out too much. So you tend to have these really short instructions. So fast 4, and now it's just repeated that 4 times. Yeah, interesting little pattern already. Not sure what it reminds me of just yet, but but I could also pattern this. So I could say, replace that with mini notation and sort of switch between speeding it up by a factor of 4 and by a factor of 3, and now have 4 things here and 3 things there, and maybe speed up again 2. But yeah, that's quite straightforward. Each transformation you add tends to be quite simple. When you start doing things like reversing it, but maybe taking that reverse thing and putting it on top of the original, start to get some more interesting symmetries appear. The first G, that just stands for graphics. So if I was making sound, I'd put something else here. But yeah, I've just got a function here, G, which is sending it to that, that little bit at the bottom for you. So what else can we do? We can maybe say down here, every third repetition, make it fast. Okay. And let's speed this up here as well, just so that's a bit clearer. Starting to get some more strange things going on. Maybe use another one, iter 4. So this will shift the pattern by a quarter of the cycle every repetition. So it starts skipping around. It starts beginning to look a bit random, even though each thing on its own is quite simple. When you combine them together, it all starts getting a bit surprising, almost glitchy. And let's try one more, superimpose. Let's see, or maybe I'll take that whole pattern, make another really simple one, like, oh, not sound, it's not a sound, green, dark green, gray, something like that, but then blend them together. I think blending things together in different ways can always be nice. So if I blend that by a factor of 0.5, so half of each, is that going to work? No. I need one more thing there. Okay, so now you can see it's going between green, dark green, and grey. I could replace this with a sine curve, so it's sort of smoothly transitioning between them. In theory, does that work? Oh yeah, it is. It's just being a bit slow. And maybe do some weird things with this as well. Okay, well, you get the idea. Oh no. Oh, you can hear me okay, can't you? It's just that I can't see it here. Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, so G stands for graphical. That's right, Julie. Okay, I hope you can hear my voice. I suddenly had a worry that you couldn't. Yes, good. Thanks for confirming that. It's always worrying in video and screaming. I just thought you would just watch me type and not be able to hear my explanation, which might not be that helpful anyway, but I hope it is. Okay, so the next thing to try, let's try this, the same language, but applied to sound. So let's find that screen. It's just with a slightly different text editor, but otherwise it's the same system. So hopefully you can hear a kick drum. Good. Okay. Amazing science. So again, there's this sequence here between BD, which stands for bass drum, and SD, which stands for snare drum. Hopefully they're in sync for you, so you can see which one is currently playing. So I'd said earlier that because it's influenced from Indian classical music, what matters isn't the the duration of individual notes, but the duration of the whole. So I've just muted it so you won't hear it for a second. But so if I add more and more sounds to this, the whole thing will speed up, and that's because it's trying to fit that sequence into the cycle. So the duration of the whole, it's just like this global thing called the cycles per second, which I can control. but every pattern is locked to the same cycles per second, which I can change globally. So if I set it to CPS 0.5, it would repeat once every 2 seconds. And if I added a second layer with some notes in it, they would stay synced to that. Are there any synesthetes in the room? So yeah. So you can already hear that there's a polyrhythm going on because there's 3 things against 4 inside the same cycle duration. Oh, I've just crashed it. Huh. Not sure why that crashed. Yeah, this is quite an experimental editor. It's quite nice because you sort of can see what's affecting the sound to some extent. But yeah, it's a bit crashy. I do like using it in performances, and actually when it crashes, that's the moment which everyone really likes, because that's when people realize, yes, this is actually a live performance. I don't really know what I'm doing, and this thing is just working just out of pure chance, and it just adds a kind of a bit of an edge to the whole performance. So yeah, this editor is called Feed Forward. It's not the standard editor for Tidal. It's even harder to install than Tidal itself, but it is free software, and you can find it on my GitHub page if you're familiar with that. Okay, so let's start again. So yeah, earlier we saw some simple sequences get transformed in different ways, and we can do the same here. Oh, thanks for the link. So here I'm using Jux. So this will work particularly well if you're on headphones. If you're just listening on a laptop, hopefully you can still hear the stereo effect. And by the way, on YouTube, there might be like a second delay between me typing something and you hearing it. So I hope that's not too confusing. There is like a live button. If that's red, that means that you should be up to date. Sometimes YouTube, you can end up listening like a minute ago, and everything would be very confusing, even more confusing than usual. Okay, if you've got any questions, please ask them, because we've only got sort of 20 minutes left. But I'll carry on sort of trying to do a quick demo of what you can do with this thing. So again, just with this simple thing, I can sort of delay this a bit. I can do things like this. So Chunk will make everything speed up in this case, because it's got Hurry 2. But only like 1/4 of the cycle, each cycle, and it'll sort of successfully hurry up a different part of the cycle each time around. So this is adding some interesting variety already. If I do that Jux Rev again, Jux Rev is actually my favorite pattern transformation ever. Yes, technology, embrace error, I think, is what we should do. I'm not sure what additive rhythms are, but if you could maybe explain, Charles, I could see if you can do that in Tidal. So you can also work with, that's a bit too fast now. You can also work with ready-made samples. For example, let's try this one. So I could, yeah, I'll use loop at and chop it into bits.
Sticks and stones and weed and bombs, high with skulls and bones. Sticks and stones and weed and bombs, high with skulls and bones.
So now you've got just a loop, a sample looping, but I've chopped it into bits, and I can start patterning those different
High with
bits.
skulls and bones. Sticks and stones, sticks and stones and stones and weed, stones and bones. Skulls and bones.
So yeah, so there's all these different ways that you can start with simple sequences and then apply different transformations until you start getting something strange. It's always constantly surprising me what it comes up with. And here I've just been patterning sounds, but you can also pattern effects as well. So for example, let's take the squiz effect, which is a personal favorite, and I could like successfully make it more distorted with this effect. Or I could add a bit of reverb, that's always good. Maybe have reverb which increases over time, following a sawtooth wave slow down. And you can also pattern things with notes. So, for example, I've got some this sort of thing. So I could start turning this into a kind of I think it's called a canon. So here I've taken quite a simple melody. I've added some Euclidean rhythms. So this is a way of generating rhythms just from a few numbers. But I've taken that basically simple melody, C, E, F, G, and then added 7 to it on top. So I've left that there, but on top of it, put a version of itself, which is up 7 notes, and also offset by 1/4 of a cycle. So you get this kind of bouncing effect up and down. So yeah, you can also do chords as well if you want. Yeah. As I say, I don't really have any musical training, so I don't tend to get too far into chords and things, but there's a guy who's revamping all the chord naming and things in Tidal at the moment. Okay, so a couple of questions have come in. So tutorial resources, if you go to the forum, which is club.tidalcycles.org, there's like a section of the forum which is just dedicated to a online video course which I did at the start of lockdown, at the first lockdown. It's an 8-week thing, and I made the first 4 weeks of it completely open. The second 4 weeks is pay as you feel, and if you haven't got any money, you can just put 0 for that and get access to the whole thing for free. And that tries to step you through the whole thing. There's also, if you go to Kindome's YouTube channel, then you'll find more sort of music-oriented tutorials and things. There is, so yeah, I mean, if you just go to the website as well, you'll find community links and things. There's a Discord, there's a forum, and yeah, it's pretty strong community now. Am I using sound plugins or sound module keyboards? I'm not at the moment. So there's behind this, there's a system called Super Collider, which is a whole synthesis framework. And here I'm just been triggering samples, but you can also trigger synthesizers in that, or you can route it all through MIDI. If you're familiar with MIDI, you can control MIDI synths and things, VSTs and that kind of thing. I tend to just stick with everything inside my laptop. You can also have external controllers to manipulate elements within the pattern as well. And people have also used it for controlling visuals and things. So Julia's got a thought, imagining some kind of improv exchange where one person is making their graphical patterns in their code and another making sound, and they're both responding to each other and to other people in the space. Yeah, this is kind of the dream, is to collaborate with visual artists. It's quite hard, I find. I have done it with my friend Antonio, just by having his screen on my screen, so I can sort of respond to that as well. I do find it quite hard because live coding takes so much attention onto the actual code when you're working that it's quite hard to collaborate with visual artists. But yeah, it's definitely something to be explored more. If you are interested in live coding visuals, then you should definitely look up Hydra by Olivia Jack. That is a really amazing system that just runs on the web browser, and it has a really strong community around it at the moment with meetups, online meetups and everything. Super good. And that's just for visuals. It's possible to link up Hydra with Tidal. I think I haven't done it, but yeah, it's an amazing system. Multi-track record it, yes, you can. So I could have each pattern going to a different channel. Oh, thanks for the link there. And yes, Kindome does have a great Tidal MIDI tutorial. So did you map these strings and symbols to specific samples? No, I've just got a collection of samples. So each, so when I do something like sound CPU, there's a folder on my hard drive, oops, called CPU with a load of WAV files in, a load of sound samples. And I can just refer to those by number to build up a rhythm. So it seems a bit of a strange way to refer to samples by number, but it's just because when you're live coding, you just want to get things as soon as possible. And it's just a really quick way of returning to a sample. But at least the folder is named. So I've got it organized so that CPU samples, which are given to me by a great record label called CPU Records. I've got some more, which, okay, I can't remember any now. Mine's gone blank. Let me think. Yeah, so I've got some Foley samples that I've downloaded from the internet. So super easy to add your own sounds to Super Collider as well. Do people ever do collaborations with live musicians? Yes. So I've got a collaboration going with my friend Emma O'Donovan at the moment. She's they're a vocalist, and we're just experimenting with where Emma is manipulating things with a controller while singing, and then I'm taking their voice and manipulating it, chopping up, sampling it, and playing back to while Ema is also playing a drum machine. So trying to find, as I said, with the visual thing, it's quite hard to find a good way of collaborating, of really, because I don't know, computers are so dominating sometimes. It can be a case where it's almost like you're controlling the other person, which isn't really a collaboration. Having that nice two-way collaboration where you're really responding properly is actually quite hard. But I've also collaborated with drummers like Matthew King, it's nice sort of trying to collaborate with instrumental musicians because they're on such a different level in terms of how fast they can respond. So when you're kind of collaborating, you kind of find this middle ground that's really rich, where I'm kind of writing this code as fast as I can, sort of, where I'm just generating all these complex rhythms, whereas they're responding straight away, and sort of building up this negotiation in time is quite a struggle, and that comes out across quite nicely musically, I think. Nashville session musicians use a notation system that's all numbers. That sounds very interesting. I'm gonna have to look that up. I'm super interested in different notation systems. Is it possible to work with microtones? Yeah. So if I was to use a synth like, I think Super Mandolin. Let's play thinking about coffee. Make it a bit longer. So I could say you can just put like decimal numbers instead of notes. And there's also a way of working with alternative tunings and things, which you'd control more on the super collider end. I should say that Tidal doesn't actually make any sound itself. It's just for making patterns, and it controls other systems for actually, sends messages to other systems for actually generating the sound. So yeah, so Super Dirt, which was made by my friend Julian, is kind of the sound engine, but it's part of Super Collider, which is just this huge system that has all kinds of stuff for tunings and things. Thanks, I'll save that link for later, Julie. Okay. So shall I just do a bit more of a jam just to finish off, maybe? And then I haven't really a bit out of practice, seeing as I haven't performed in outdoors for about a year and a half, but I'll see if I can just come up with something. Okay, I've ended up with 7 notes per cycle then. I'll see if I can actually cope with that. I quite like that mandolin sound. Let's see if I can do something like this. gonna have to go back to 4/4. This is too confusing.